Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the 2025 draft, kind of a look ahead into who are the players that could go number one overall, who are the players that will be following very closely after them. So, broke that down a little bit if you want to check that out, but let's get into the top 10 Tuesday. And the cover athletes for college football 25 has been a huge topic of conversation the last pretty much 24 hours, really. And some different news has come out around that. It seems like there are going to be multiple different cover athletes and multiple different versions. So some guys, it sounds like it's going to be three guys, but not exactly sure about that number quite yet. But it sounds like it's going to be multiple different cover athletes, multiple different covers, some with just one athlete, some with all three. They will all play different positions and they'll all be from different conferences. So, getting a little bit from everywhere, picking hopefully a defensive player in this mix. I have a couple in my list that I hope make the cut, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens here. All of the players do need to be current players, so can't add in any legends, or this would have been a much harder list to make, even though it was already incredibly hard to do in the first place. But let's get to my picks, and it's kind of an interesting group, right? I think when you start any conversation around college football 25 and cover athletes and faces of the sport, it has to start with Shadur Sanders. And it's because of the name, it's because of the team, it's because of his dad. All of it plays a part, but this kid is as big of a name as there is in college football, probably behind his father, the biggest name in college football right now. And this feels like an obvious choice. And now there's plenty of other guys in the Big 12 that lay claim to that. One guy that's not even on this list is Ollie Gordon, who was the Doak Walker Award winner a year ago that I would love to see on the cover. But when you talk about the Big 12, when you talk about the team, the player that gets the most eyes, it's hard to beat Shadur Sanders, so I had to start him off there. And then you have Travis Hunter, I think another guy that definitely could be a big part of this. Obviously, when you're doing different positions, it helps to have a guy that plays both sides of the ball. You get to give a little bit of love to offense and defense at the exact same time, so it doesn't necessarily hurt anything. I think, honestly, between the Big 12 teams and all of the players that are out there are definitely some options. You have Ollie Gordon, you have Cam Rising over at Utah, you have Avery Johnson or Dylan Edwards over at Kansas State, but at the end of the day, I feel like one of these two guys will be the representative from the Big 12 if they do have a representative, because there's no guarantee that every single conference is excuse me there's no guarantee that every conference will be represented, but if the Big 12 is, I would expect it to be one of those two guys. Then you have James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. I think this is a guy that helps you get check off the defensive position, of course, helps you check off the SEC, but also Tennessee is a huge, huge brand that I think a lot of people might downplay a little bit. Having that T logo in it, having, that yellow or that orange that they throw out there. I think it's something that will definitely make the games pop. Will definitely get a lot of people trying to buy it, and will definitely help out that defensive position where you probably want someone on the defensive side of the ball on there. I think James Pierce Jr. would be my number one choice if I was to pick, to be totally honest with you. And then Quinn Ewers, I think this is a no-brainer. When you're a quarterback at Texas, it's one of the biggest positions in college football. It's one of the biggest positions in sports. It's one of the things that a lot of people, especially in the state of Texas, grow up dreaming of being, and Quinn Ewers was one of those guys. So I would not be surprised. Honestly, I'd be surprised if they haven't approached Quinn Ewers about this. I don't know if he's, accepted or if he's going to be the guy, but I think he's kind of a no-brainer, especially with someone like Arch Manning not being in the game, hyping up the starting quarterback, hyping up the guy that will be in the game for Texas at quarterback is never a bad plan from a marketing perspective. But at 5, I do have Harold Perkins. I think this is a guy, it's kind of the same thing as James Pierce Jr., where you have that LSU helmet. You have a guy that a lot of people know with Harold Perkins, who had a remarkable freshman year and plays all over the field and does a lot of incredible things. So definitely someone that would get my eyes, and definitely a game that I would buy if he was the cover athlete, because in my opinion, this is one of the best players in the country. He just was used incredibly poorly a year ago, and if he's used correctly this year, could just burst off the page, to be totally honest with you. And then I have Carson Beck. Quarterback for the best team in the country will always be on this list. There's no question about that. Georgia is the team that everyone has pegged as the best team in the country. Having that power G, being the quarterback, being a guy that everyone really knows the name of, and everyone's going into this season with a lot of high hopes for him, I think this is one that I would not be surprised at all to see him be one of the covers, cover that southeast portion of the country, and probably make some people mad around Gainesville or around Auburn, Alabama. But at the end of the day, I think this is a slam dunk pick, to be totally honest with you. And then you got Barrett Carter, the linebacker from Clemson. This one's a little bit more off the beaten path, but again, Clemson having that helmet on your game is never a bad thing. I think he's someone that is really going to jump off the page this year, is super dynamic. Kind of another guy like Abdul Carter, who absolutely could be on this list as well. But a leader of the team, someone who has been huge for Clemson in the last couple of years. And I think if you want a defensive player, if you're looking for an ACC player in particular, I think this would be a great choice. Now, you have Cam Ward, you have some other guys that absolutely could lay claim to this, but I think Barrett Carter would be a fantastic choice as one of the pieces. Luther Burden is another name I have here. You need a wide receiver. You need someone that's a little bit one of the skill players that's dynamic, and this is as good as it gets. I think this is a guy that honestly I expect to see on the cover. I feel like he's someone that just fits the bill almost perfectly. Now, it's going to be really, really hard to beat out the quarterbacks that are in the SEC, but let's say Shedeur Sanders is the shoe-in to be one of the cover athletes, which I would argue he is. Then you have to fill with likely not a quarterback from the SEC. I think Luther Burden would be a fantastic choice to do that. So I think he's someone that I would love to see on the cover. I tend to believe that he might be one of the three. Maybe I'll give a prediction here at the end, actually. But moving on to Donovan Edwards at 9. New leader of the reigning national champion. I think this makes sense. Michigan logo, no name. Now, another guy, Will Johnson, absolutely lays claim to this as well. So I think between Michigan, I think those would be the two guys that they'll be kind of battling over. But I just feel like there's more people that maybe are casual college football fans that know the name Donovan Edwards, partly because of Gus Johnson's calls in some of those games. But I think he's someone that definitely could be the Big 12 or the Big 10 representative and be a great piece for that. And then you have Caleb Downs, the safety at Ohio State. I think there's a number of things that come into play here. I've said this before a number of times. In my opinion, he's the best player in the country. I think him moving from Alabama to Ohio State has made him an even bigger name in the world of college football. So that would make this give you a little bit of marketing on Twitter, whether it's people getting really mad about that or Ohio State fans absolutely loving it. So tons to kind of pull from there. I think that would be a very interesting choice. The Big Ten, it feels like, is a conference that doesn't necessarily have that guy that you can point to and say that is going to be the guy on the cover. You have Shedeur Sanders in the Big 12. In the ACC, you can point to Cam Ward. You can point to Barrett Carter. In the Big Ten, it's a little bit more sketchy. It's a little bit more confusing, but there's plenty of talented players over there. Mason Graham could absolutely be on the cover here. Drew Aller would be surprising to me, but absolutely could be one of the players that they're going after. But I left off guys like Jalen Milroe, Dylan Gabriel, Ollie Gordon, tons others that have popped in my head throughout this thing. But it's going to be a really, really tough one to figure out. Matt Brown, a reporter that has been covering this stuff wall to wall, has said one of these kind of comes out of left field for him. Not exactly sure what that means in terms of how he thinks of left field, but I do think there are a remarkable amount of great choices here. If I was to give a prediction, I'm very, very hesitant to do that, but I suppose if I was, I would probably go Shedeur Sanders as one of them, Luther Burden as one of them, the wide receiver from Missouri, and then I think I would go Caleb Downs as the safety, as the defensive player, as the Big Ten representative. That is a very, very questionable three, because I think it could go any of these different directions and I would absolutely love it. But if I was to guess, I think that's the direction that I would go. But tons of different combinations that could happen, tons of different people that could grace the cover, and I love a lot of the options, so not necessarily going to be mad any which way. This was a list that was essentially just kind of throwing 10 guys that I think would fit the bill pretty well, and then figuring out as I was making the list that there are tons of guys that absolutely lay claim to this. So it'll be interesting to see that kind of unfold and who are the guys that actually grace the cover. Possibly that comes out in May with that big release with some of the gameplay and some of the different things like that. But for right now, you can throw out all the hypotheticals you want. I've seen some West Virginia fans hype up Garrett Green as one of them, which would be very, very funny and very cool. But we'll see what happens. I think it's obviously a huge honor to be a cover athlete, and I think if they asked any one of these kids, they would immediately say yes. But we'll see what happens. We'll see who ends up gracing the cover. But you got plenty of really, really good options around college football this year. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages. We have tons of people doing incredible work covering every little bit of every sport you could possibly want. So if you need anything in the world of sports, we have you covered here over at GSMC. So tune in to any show you'd like. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.